RuBru means face-to-face in the Urdu language. If you are a Muslim, the Ru Bru FTF series can help you find your bearings on where Muslims stand today in relation to their recent past. All viewers may find many of the misconceptions floating around, corrected by the information the RuBru FTF series supplies. DMSR stands for Do Muslims Still Regress? History records the ventures of military leaders and kings who united tribes and societies to dominate other nations and control their material and human resources. However, the colonialism of recent history stands out as the only example where societies were motivated by greed, hitherto exclusive to the kings, and developed control over others' resources at a level not witnessed in human history before. Spurred by technological advances, European societies had the resources to pursue their insatiable lust for world resources and tried to explain it, as some of it is still being explained, with implausible justifications. In the words of Edward Said, the foundational figure in post-colonial studies, the argument, when reduced to its simplest form, was clear, it was precise, it was easy to grasp. There are Westerners, and there are Orientals. The former dominate, the latter must be dominated, which usually means having their land occupied, their internal affairs rigidly controlled, and their blood and treasure put at the disposal of one or another Western power. The disintegration of Muslim power in Spain, 1492, was followed by its resurgence in the East under the Mamluks and then under the Ottomans. The grandeur of the 16th century and signs of decline in the 18th century were the hallmarks of the Muslim societies under the Ottoman Empire. Most of the travel accounts from the 16th and the beginning of the 17th century celebrate Ottoman power and the rigor of its administration. The colonization started and intensified during the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire from the last quarter of the 18th to the first quarter of the 20th century. The extent of colonialism at its height in the early 20th century is reflected in Edward Said's observation. By 1914, Europe held a grand total of roughly 85% of the earth as colonies, protectorates, dependencies, dominions, and commonwealths. No other associated set of colonies in history was as large, none so totally dominated, none so unequal in power to the Western metropolis. Resistance to colonial control involved phenomenal struggle in the Muslim world. Algeria, for example, carried out one of the longest and bloodiest struggles for independence against France, which consumed 500,000 to 1,500,000 Algerian lives. The other Muslim countries experienced bloodshed to varying degrees to achieve independence. Turkey, Iran, and Afghanistan were the only exceptions able to maintain their identities and control of their lands in the face of the fierce flood of colonialism. Each did it in their distinct style and after accepting compromises. A famous historian, Roba Mantran, in his book Great Dates in Islamic History, divides the recent Muslim history in 4 periods, which provide a clear picture of where Muslims are today in relation to their recent past. The first period is from 1775 to 1920, during which the shadows of darkness covered the Muslim world. Muslim states all over the world come under increasing pressure from the Western powers: Britain, France, Russia, and the Netherlands. All Muslim states in Africa, Central Asia, Asia, and the Middle East come under direct colonial rule, where extraction of their resources is in the hands of the dominant colonial powers. Iran and Afghanistan are able to maintain a semblance of independence at the cost of substantial concessions they are forced to make to the Western powers both on economic and political fronts. Ottoman Empire is practically disintegrated, losing most of its territory to the Western powers. Awareness of powerlessness takes hold in Muslim societies. The second period is from 1920 to 1945, in which the British and French totally dominated the Muslim world. The Muslim world is in total control of Britain and France. Italy, the Netherlands, and Russia control parts of the Muslim world. Iran, Afghanistan, and Turkey defend their independence. Turkey replaces the outdated political structure with Western-style democracy. Messages of thinkers and reformers like Jamal-ud Din Afghani, d. 1897, Muhammad Abduh, d. 1906, Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, d. 1938, and Hassan al-Banna, D. 1949, start sinking in the Muslim mind. Political movements take birth in the Muslim world, which gradually turn into freedom movements. World War II weakens the hold of all colonial powers on their colonies. The third period is from 1945 to 1965, in which Muslim states gain political independence. Muslims stand up to regain control of their lands. The spread of independence from North Africa to Indonesia is phenomenal. Algeria and Indonesia force the colonizers, France and the Netherlands, to leave their lands. Elsewhere, the story is similar. Islam plays a significant role in supplying energy to indigenous people to stand for their God-given right to freedom. The freed states jealously guard their borders. The fourth period is the current period from 1965 to date, in which the Muslim affirmation appears. Physical control of their own lands is the first step to independent and respectable living. Muslims' affirmation is on. The direction of the movement of Muslim societies is clear from the above summary, which unmistakably is for the better. It is also a fact that the efforts to change the will of people recently freed have not stopped. These efforts, after the end of physical control, are being continued by what is known as the coloniality of knowledge and information. Muslims have regained physical control of their land, yet the process of recovering from colonization is incomplete at present. The first reason is the superior economic and military prowess of the West, which enables imperialism to continue to operate in the developing world. The scope of this phenomenon for this discussion is limited to its impact on the ongoing process of decolonization. The second reason is the coloniality of knowledge and information, which impacts the minds of some observers. This will be explained in more detail here. DMSR 3 series shows how the misconception of Islam, without any scholarly analyses, was propagated in the West for centuries. It also shows how the grand contribution of Muslims to science was placed out of sight in the West for centuries. Recent times have corrected these misconceptions. The infamous theory of social Darwinism was fabricated to justify colonialism, and the white man's burden was invented to hide the greed for acquiring others' lands and resources. These two theories have also been disproven by scientific work and historical evidence. The coloniality of knowledge operates at levels not easily discernible by all, making it still effective. The seminal work of Edward Said, particularly his groundbreaking book Orientalism, 1978, has garnered immense recognition worldwide, profoundly influencing fields such as literature, post-colonial studies, cultural studies, history, and political science. It has become a foundational text in critical theory, taught in universities worldwide, and cited in a vast array of scholarly work. He extensively explored how Western superiority was imposed on the minds of the colonized. He argued that Western discourses constructed an image of the Orient as backward and inferior, thereby justifying the colonial domination. In his words, Orientalism was a political vision of reality whose structure promoted the difference between the familiar West, us, and the strange Orient, the them. He articulated the processes through which the West imposed a sense of its own superiority onto the colonized, shaping not only the external representation of the Orient, but also how the colonized came to see themselves, often internalizing these imposed notions of inferiority. The coloniality of knowledge refers to the pervasive influence of colonial structures on the production, validation, and distribution of knowledge and information. The term was coined by Peruvian sociologist Aníbal Quijano in 1990 and has been explained by many scholars to draw attention to the ongoing legacy of colonialism in epistemic practices worldwide. Aníbal Quijano, in his article Coloniality of Power, Eurocentrism, and Latin America, says that the European paradigm of rationality/modernity from the 16th century established a global pattern of knowledge in which the experience of local histories of Europe was made into a universal history, denying and silencing other knowledge and cosmologies. Quijano argued that coloniality involves not just economic or political control, but also the imposition of Western knowledge systems as universal, marginalizing and devaluing other epistemic traditions. Walter D. Mignolo, an Argentine scholar, has significantly expanded on the concept of the coloniality of knowledge, emphasizing how Western epistemology has been universalist at the expense of other knowledge systems. According to him, the colonial difference, sustained by the coloniality of power and the coloniality of knowledge, serves to classify the population of the planet in ways that naturalize the superiority of Western ways of knowing. Decolonizing the mind is a concept popularized by Ngugi wa Thiong'o of Kenya in his book, Decolonising the Mind. He recommends recognition of and challenges to the dominant Western epistemologies and views on other civilizations. The struggle is against the world-known imperialism, which, because of the superior economic and military prowess of the West, influences its interaction with the developing world. According to him, imperialism is total. It has economic, political, military, and psychological consequences for the people of the world today. The oppressed and the exploited of the earth maintain their defiance. The biggest weapon wielded and actually daily unleashed by imperialism against that collective defiance is the cultural bomb. It makes them see their past as one wasteland of non-achievement and makes them want to distance themselves from that wasteland. The legacy of colonialism that still shapes the production, dissemination, and validation of knowledge is being studied and questioned all around the world. Research undertaken by scholars shows how Western epistemologies have marginalized non-Western perspectives and knowledge systems. There is a need to reconstruct and reimagine knowledge, identity, history, and reality from a decolonial perspective. An original view, free from narratives floating around and based purely on facts, can lead us to realistic conclusions. Humanity appears to have permanently turned its back on colonialism, which means an end to the physical control of other nations' resources. However, the greed that fueled colonialism has now propped up a new monster: imperialism, which relies on remote control operated through its economic prowess as opposed to the physical control of colonial times. After waking up from over a century-long slumber, Muslim states grapple with the challenges of newfound independence. Experiences etched in the psyche of nations take time to erase or remodel. One such lengthy experience of Muslim societies is living under kings, as some still do, even in modern times. Given that Europe took more than 3 centuries to walk into the Age of Enlightenment, it is only fair to allow time for the Muslim nations to catch up with the spirit of the modern age. Dislike for the speed of progress and nostalgic memories of the past should not dispute that the direction of the Muslim movement is for the betterment. The difference between a society's states becomes discernible only when seen over a sufficient length of time.